Well, actually, I've been photographing in the Himalaya for almost 40 years. So it's not that the Tibetan community in exile was something new to me. Like I've been seeing them, for 40 years, through the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and so on, in different parts of the Himalaya. Because my main interest is actually the Himalaya. And I can say, actually, I think I've spent almost my entire photographic life in the Himalaya and different parts of the Himalaya. So they were always there. They were in Ladakh, they were in parts of Nepal, they were in parts of Lahul, they were in parts of Spiti. And when we used to go up there for different expeditions, trekking, even photography trips, we used to see them and we used to photograph them. But we never thought at that time, or at least I never thought at that time, of doing a separate, project or a separate story or a separate, essay on them. This actually happened much later. I'll tell you, in 2012, my wife Paula and I, we decided to go up to McLeodganj because we wanted to see this Tibetan community in exile, how they lived, how they have made a small country of themselves on a hilltop, which was given to them by the government of India. So we went there and we spent 7-10 days in McLeodganj. We stayed there, and I was also able to visit the offices of the Tibetan government in exile and mention to them that I'm here for 7-10 days, and the Dalai Lama was also present at that time, and he was going to have a prayer meeting which I wanted to attend and photograph. So I got the permission from them to go there as a photographer, and I spent 7 days, 10 days with them in different monasteries, in their centers and so on. And Paula was also there with me, and while both of us were there, actually she said that this Tibet project has got something. She said we should actually do it because we don't know how long the Tibetans are going to remain in the way they are. 2012, when we were in McLeodganj, was also a very disturbed time for the Tibetans. I don't know if you know, but during that time there was a lot of oppressed and uprisings in Tibet itself, and many Tibetan youth, around 20-25 years of age, had actually self-immolated themselves. They had put themselves on fire as a protest against the Chinese in Tibet itself. So when we were in McLeodganj, it was a very volatile time. There was all these protests going on. There were these movements going on. There were speeches going on. And that was on one side of McLeodganj. And on the other side of McLeodganj, you had the Dalai Lama, calm, quiet, like he is sitting in his monastery, conducting his prayer service. So it was a huge contrast. So that was, I think, the starting of our thoughts of doing a project called Tibetan Exile. And when we came back to the city and so on, Paula started doing her work, basically her, printmaking and making, installations and all. And I started thinking about my earlier photographs, which I had on this exile, and putting them into folders, and then looking, where it can make a story, where are the gaps actually, and that's how we started doing it year after year. And basically, it's a project of maybe 10, 12, 15 years, Actually, this project covers a period of time in the history of Tibet in exile. It was shot, say, between mid-2000s to about late 2019, maybe say 14, 15 years or so. So it captures the state of Tibet in exile during those years, which was quite important and quite volatile. So if somebody comes, say, 20 years later and shoots Tibet in exile, it will be a different project. Similarly, if somebody had come 20 years earlier and shot Tibet in exile, it would be a different project. So this project actually captures the history of Tibet and the situation of Tibet in exile during those years. And I think it's important for that itself, because it documents a period of Tibet in exile, the history, and the things that were happening there, which, if it was not documented, will actually go unnoticed and it will just, vanish. That is actually, I think, the importance of this particular project.